Good afternoon. I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News, coming to you from our digital desk. We continue to follow this morning's and last night's actual tragic news out of Reagan National Airport in the Washington, D.C. area. The American Airlines flight colliding with a Black Hawk helicopter, and unfortunately there are no survivors. 64 people aboard the plane, the commercial plane, 4 of those being crew members, and then the 3 soldiers aboard the Black Hawk helicopter unfortunately killed in the crash. We're going to have a conversation with a local aviation expert about this incident, really the first in 16 years in the United States, a commercial crash involving this amount of deaths. There are videos out there that we understand the sensitive nature of the video of the crash itself, but it does sort of help start to begin to understand what was going on at the time. And as I show you this video, I want you to pay attention to the plane that's inbound. They are going to be the lower lights on your screen. You're going to see some lights on the top of the screen. That is an outbound flight. The helicopter is tough to see as it collides with the lower plane, but your eyes tend to get distracted on the upper lights. Take a look now at, this is from EarthCam video, the lower lights there, and that is the actual collision with the Black Hawk helicopter. Then all of the victims and the ground and the crash ending up in the Potomac River, further making this a difficult situation for all involved. We have a quick, the latest from CBS that we're going to play before we bring in our aviation expert. Take a look.
EarthCam video shows the moment a commercial passenger jet and an Army helicopter collided in midair just before 9 p.m. near Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport.
Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river.
Now a recovery effort for the victims in the frigid waters of the Potomac River.
At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
American Airlines says Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines from Wichita, Kansas, was approaching the airport with 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board.
We're absolutely heartbroken for the family and loved ones of the passengers and crew members.
The Army says the Black Hawk helicopter involved, similar to this one, was on a training flight with 3 service members on board.
In a statement, President Donald Trump said he's monitoring the situation on social media. He also questioned the actions of the helicopter and air traffic control prior to the collision.
We will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public.
Multiple agencies are investigating the incident, including the Pentagon, FBI, Federal Aviation Administration, with the National Transportation Safety Board taking the lead. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
And we should tell you at 2:45, the NTSB, who is the lead on this investigation, is going to hold a news conference again at 2:45. There are going to be at least preliminarily details released that could shed some light on just exactly what happened, why this collision in midair occurred. What we're going to do now is welcome in, and we've had Mr. Leibovitz with us several times. Jamie Leibovitz works for Nuremberg Paris. He is an aviation litigation attorney. Mr. Leibovitz, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, Dan. Under the circumstances, it's a very tragic day for the families of these passengers and for all Americans.
It is extremely tragic. Let's think about that number, 16 years in the United States since we have had a commercial aviation accident of this scale. What does that say about the aviation industry in this country?
Well, it reaffirms what has been long held belief that the United States aviation industry, from airplane manufacturers to the airlines and to the FAA air traffic control network, is among the safest, if not the safest, in the world. And I've been practicing in this area for over 40 years, and I've seen the number of aviation disasters diminish over the course of that time frame because of the implementation of a number of different safety practices, both in the operation of aircraft and the manufacture of aircraft. But unfortunately, tragically, of course, things happen, and this is one like the vast majority should never have happened. This was, in my opinion, just based on what is known so far, was preventable. While this is an investigation that's going to take many months to develop before we get all the answers, I think just based on what we've seen, just from the video you just showed and from what earlier accounts have been so far in the last 12 hours, there are certainly some good, working theories as to what went wrong here.
And I want to jump on that word preventable. You're not the only person to use it. President Donald Trump last night in his first statement that he put out also called this a preventable accident or a preventable tragedy. What do you mean this was preventable? Is this a communication mistake? Is this human error? What do you mean by preventable?
I think there's both communication and human error involved. Let's remember, the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area is one of the most heavily trafficked quadrant of airspace in the United States. You have three major airports in that region. You have Washington National, you have Dulles, and you have Baltimore Washington International Airport. On top of that, you have a lot of military aircraft, and specifically helicopters that are moving high profile, both military personnel from the Pentagon to other staff that are in government that are transported from one location to another. So this again is heavily trafficked. Nevertheless, there are procedures and processes in place to make sure that there is appropriate separation of aircraft in the airspace. And of course, that falls on the responsibility of air traffic control. That falls on the responsibility of flight crews. This was an evening where the skies were clear. You're flying under what's called night visual rules. And even though you could operate using the instrument landing system, which this crew may have been, and I mean the American Airlines crew of that flight, there is so much visibility that you cannot, overlook the responsibility to see and avoid or to maintain what is known as situational awareness. The American Airlines flight was originally vectored to land at the main airport runway, which is the longest runway there, used by most commercial airliners. There's a secondary runway that is oftentimes used by commuter aircraft, such as this, which is a CRJ 700. Doesn't require the same length as a 737 or an Airbus A320. So for reasons yet not known, the American Airlines jet was instructed to a course deviation and to land on the shorter runway. Notwithstanding that, the airspace around National Airport is still supposed to be protected from military aircraft that are traversing the area, and protected in terms of vertical distance and horizontal distance. So what appears to have been a nighttime training operation for the military helicopter. We don't know all the background information on the crew, but there are certain points along the routes that these military aircraft travel that they have to maintain a certain altitude above these points. And what's very possible is that the military helicopter was at an altitude where it did not belong, or which was prohibited because of the necessity of separating itself from arriving and departing commercial airline traffic. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely. I mean, it coincides with exactly what happened. You have a plane that is just mere, a minute and a half from touching down. That puts it at a fairly low altitude and within the range of an airport. We all understand there are certain rules that surround an airport, whether we're talking drones or helicopters or whatever. There are rules about when and where and how high you can fly in that area. I think that makes perfect sense. Let me ask this question. Would this accident have happened during the day? Is this something that because of the darkness, because of the night, or does that not factor in at all?
No, the darkness certainly complicates what is already a very congested, restricted area of airspace. And what further may have compromised the vision or the ability, excuse me, of the military crew to have identified other aircraft in the area was what has been reported that they may have been using night vision goggles. Night vision goggles, there's certainly a lot of benefits to it, of course, but also in this type of environment, especially with all the lights, there's lights from the airport, there's lights on the ground from the various buildings. It could provide you with some, false sense of where is the aircraft that you're supposed to be avoiding. Okay, you might see an aircraft that is really way off in the distance, which is in fact much closer to your airplane than or your helicopter than what really is the case. So the night vision goggles would certainly be a factor in compromising the ability of the helicopter crew to visualize and see and avoid the commercial airplane that was landing. And there are particular air traffic control rules that pilots are trained to comply with to avoid other aircraft, particularly if you're flying under visual conditions. If this was during the day, it would have been much easier to identify an approaching aircraft into that airport. Even if the helicopter was at an altitude where it should not have been, and that may be in the case, the maneuverability capabilities of the helicopter to turn left, let's say, or to climb immediately is much more capable than an airliner. And so I think in the days and the weeks and months as they unfold, we'll probably see that, a major contributing factor was the actions or the inactions on the part of the crew operating the helicopter. But again, this is just early on, and I wouldn't call it speculation, but it's certainly in the differential of the possibilities of what occurred.
We touched on this in the beginning, just the complexity of the Washington, D.C. area. We've all seen Marine One when the president is aboard, take off and leave. If you've ever traveled to the Washington, D.C. area, there's always seem to be military helicopters and aircraft in and around the air. Is it too busy? Is the airspace over Washington, D.C., was it asking for an accident like this?
Well, it's a very good point, and I would expect that there will be, among the investigations conducted in the wake of this tragedy, a very close look at the volume of traffic in and around the Washington, D.C. metropolitan airspace. And, airports like National and like New York's LaGuardia Airport, which is one of the other major airports in the area of the East, they are controlled. There are only a certain number of slots that are available to airlines for the operation of their aircraft in and out of those particular airports. You may see in the future that there will be a reduction in the number of slots that are made available to the airlines to just further reduce the risk of something like this from happening again. And let me emphasize, air travel in the United States is one of the safest modes of transportation there is. And the likelihood of being in an airplane accident is far, far less than being in an accident in any other mode of transportation. So this is not to discourage anyone from flying. On the contrary, I would encourage people who need to fly, who wish to fly, that they should. But there's going to be I would expect a close examination of this airspace and those at other congested areas to make certain that all the layers of safety are in place to reduce to zero, really, the probabilities of something like this from ever happening again.
We are speaking with Jamie Leibovitz. He is an attorney here in the Cleveland area with Nuremberg, Paris. He has an expertise in aviation litigation. Mr. Leibovitz, we certainly appreciate your time. I want you to leave us with maybe one final thought. If I'm someone at home, and whether it's listening to the 245 NTSB news conference, as it's listening to news conference and updates over the coming weeks and months, what should people keep in mind? What should we be listening for?
Well, keep in mind the families of those who perished. That's first and foremost. Secondly, listen to all the reporting that comes forth from both the National Transportation Safety Board and other agencies such as the FAA, particularly because there may be air traffic control negligence. The FAA will be significantly involved in the investigation. And so I would just pay very close attention to the reporting from the governmental agencies and from those like myself who are regularly involved in these types of tragedies, because what we're looking for are the facts and you know, to make certain that there's a takeaway from something like this, so that everything that can be done is done to prevent a future tragedy from ever occurring again.
Mr. Leibovitz, your expertise is always welcome. It is incredible to have a resource like you here in Northeast Ohio. So we certainly appreciate the time on such a tragic day. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time today. Be well.
All right, take care. That's going to wrap it up. Again, just as Mr. Leibovitz said, take it all in, listen to all reports. I would highly encourage you to stay away from social media. We have seen how quickly things can blow up and get out of control, and theories and literally just crap that ends up on social media. That's not where you should be paying attention. You should be paying attention to the National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, and officials who are actually there on the ground doing the work and trying to get the investigation underway. If we have any other breaking news, and we will have that 2:45 news conference here on our streaming platforms. Otherwise, look for our 3.5 news of news and weather to start at 3 o'clock on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media at Cleveland 19 News.